Hey, everybody. Thanks and welcome to Coronavirus Conversations. We are live with a very special edition today that I'm very excited to be part of. I am turning the microphone around and I'm turning the reporter's notebook around. And we're going to spend some time today interviewing our newsroom. Both me and you, our listeners, and the folks that are joining us on the chat are going to get an opportunity to ask questions of these socially distanced journalists that are far away from each other in an environment where they normally aren't. Coronavirus Conversations is brought to you by Source Media Properties, our members, our newsroom partners, and a grant from the Facebook Journalism Project. We are here, and this purpose of this webinar series is to try to be helpful and useful during the coronavirus epidemic, or pandemic rather, and to really try to put the service in public service journalism to be able to, again, be helpful and useful to our communities. And that's what we're going to do here today. But we're going to do this in a little bit different way because we have, over the last 2.5 weeks, really learned so much from you as we've done these webinars. And we wanted to see if this might be an opportunity for us to all talk together, both our newsroom and our readers and our viewers, to help us understand more about, number one, there's 3 key questions that we're going to try to answer today. Number one, how are we doing? So we want to know, I mean, good news is great, but if you think we've got room to improve, that's the second key question. Where can we get better? How can we improve? And the third key question as we move through this is we really want to know from you, our readers, where would you like us to focus next? Would you like us to think differently about COVID-19 coverage? Are there other news topics or items that you want us to dig into, maybe as it relates to COVID-19, but isn't specifically about the pandemic? We really want to hear from you. And so we're going to jump right into this, and I want to introduce you to our first 3 guests. I don't know where they show up on your screen, so I'm just going to kind of point to them. The guy in the Ohio University tracksuit is Carl Hunnell. Carl is our city editor, and he's done a ton of coverage on COVID-19. He's joining us from IdeaWorks. Larry Phillips, our managing editor, with the lamp growing out of his head. That's Larry, and he's joining us from another area of IdeaWorks, properly socially distanced, and the only instruction follower in the whole group is Brittany Stock, who's joining us from her home in Shelby, Ohio. She's our solutions and engagement editor. And I'm really glad to have you guys here. And one last thing before we get started, our entire newsroom is on this call. So they are monitoring Facebook feeds where we're live streaming, and they are monitoring the chat here in Crowdcast. So we really want to encourage you guys to ask any of them questions. Newsroom, make sure you let people know you're here by saying hi in the chat, and we'll launch into this. And as we move through these questions, as an audience member, make sure you drop your questions into the chat, and we will make sure we get them answered as we move along. So my first question for you guys is pretty simple. What's the role of a local newsroom like ours in an environment like this? And Larry, I'll start with you.
I think, Jay, you started it with the last time I saw you, which was almost 3 weeks ago now. But I think your marching orders were, let's be helpful. And I don't remember the second part, not hysterical. Was that
useful? Helpful and useful.
Helpful. Okay. But I hope we have been that. There's a number of examples of trying to do that, or living up to that, trying to live up to that charge. I think the first one that kind of comes to mind is the Pep Boy story, when there was kind of that erroneous report out there that there was a Pep Boys employee who had COVID-19, and it turned out to be bogus. But it had gotten so far out of hand on Facebook, with people insisting that the Richmond Public Health Department was lying, and we were lying, and we were helping cover up, and all this stuff. And it turned out it became a criminal matter because someone had lied on Facebook and had kind of spread panic. And so you ask, what's our role? I think that's our role, is to disseminate useful, helpful, and accurate information throughout the community. And I hope we've lived up to that. We've tried. We tried to look at other parts of the country and how they're dealing with the pandemic in their communities as well, which is something we kind of routinely do at Richland Source. But that's kind of Brittany's purview, and I'll let her speak to that one.
Brittany, that was a very good segue and a good throw on your part. Larry, we're getting better as we move along.
I forgot to mention our sponsors, though.
We're gonna continue to work with you on thanking sponsors and newsroom partners like the Facebook Journalism Project, Spirion, WAB Accounting Advisors, DRM.
Larry's going to be doing the NASCAR sponsorship hats after the race. We'll put them there. Yeah, exactly.
But Brittany, I'm going to ask you that same question though. In a situation like this, what is the role of a local newsroom? What role do you see? What role should a local newsroom play?
Yeah. So, I don't know, you put it right in the chat, the facts over fear mantra that we've been trying to live up to these past couple weeks. And that was really relevant in the very beginning of this crisis, I think. I mean, it's still relevant now, but it's kind of like Larry said, when rumors and stuff were flying and we just didn't know. And sometimes we didn't even know what exactly was going on. But focusing on the facts and trying not to give in to the emotional side of your brain and letting it spiral into fear and despair, I think was really important. And, just for everyone's mental health sake. So that's been a big part of it. I think the facts over fear and everything that Larry said. And then for me in my specific role as engagement and solutions editor, what I see our role as a local newsroom is to bring the community together as much as we can in these times of social distancing, with things like this, with like our daily heroes stories that we've been publishing, with the open source platform where we're encouraging people to ask questions of us so we can answer them, bringing them together, in a not a literal sense, where we're trying really hard to still retain that sense of community, because I believe that is a crucial role of a local newsroom like us, where it's, we're bringing the community together to have these thoughtful conversations. And then on the solution side, I think it's important to remember that in these times of crisis, and it's really easy to spiral down into the gloom and doom, and to remember that there are people that are working on solutions. We partner so much with the Solutions Journalism Network, and the whole point of Solutions Journalism, for those who don't know, is to report on responses to social issues and responses to problems. So it's like, yes, we know that COVID-19 is a problem, but what are people doing about it? One that I wrote about was about the Iron Vault Distillery in Galleon, who, is moving from making whiskey to making hand sanitizer. So it's nice to know, I think, in these times too, that there are people who are working on solutions, on a large scale and just on a local level. So I think, being well-rounded and telling the whole story, like we always say, of Richland County and the good and the bad, that's really important for us as a local newsroom.
Hey, Carl, you had an interesting experience as just yesterday in terms of this, but I'd like for you to touch on that just briefly, but sticking to the question, what is the role of a local newsroom in your experience in a crisis like this?
Right. It's always interesting to me, and it's changed over the years, but I think one of the things that a good newsroom has to do is, at the same time you're reporting the news and the breaking news and the crisis news, is you're offering some kind of perspective. I mean, there are bad things happening right now, but we've survived bad things in the past, and you kind of go back and you talk to them a little bit about, in this particular case, previous pandemics, previous medical crises. So they have some sense of perspective. So we're not just daily giving you, here's the current number of people that have tested positive for coronavirus. Here's the number of people that are on ventilators. What else is going on? I was running a newsroom on 9/11. and we had to make some very fast, hard decisions because much more limited basis. But there was a lot of fear that morning and that afternoon because people were watching on TV as people leaped from burning buildings. And we had to make some very quick decisions. Okay, how are we going to cover this from a local standpoint? So part of that is just kind of I don't know, whether it's a hand on the rudder, making sure we're all going in the same direction. What is it the community wants to know? What does the community need to know? And oh, by the way, what else is going on in the community that's not tied to this? Because there's still things happening in Mansfield and Richland County that have nothing to do with coronavirus.
That's great. And that's a great segue to a brief break here. I want to make sure that, our readers and the folks that are with us here on Facebook and Crowdcast, make sure that if there's something that you think that we need to know, if there's a topic that you would like to see us turn our eyes to, if you see areas in where we can improve as a newsroom, as we move along, we want you to please drop those into the chats. That's what this is all about, is getting your feedback and making sure that we're living up to our mantra of doing journalism with you. And that kind of brings me to my next question for you guys, and which is, what does it mean to be of public service as a journalist? And how have you seen our team try to live up to that obligation in recent weeks?
Carl, I'd say you've got a good anecdote right out of the chute on that one. Just happened last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that local government is maintaining services, trying to maintain their role even while this is going on. And obviously, things like public meetings, Mansfield City Council met last night or tried to meet. Obviously, you don't want people in the same room together, so they're trying to figure out how to do it technologically so that the public, which has every right under state law to view what a public body is doing, they couldn't make the technology work last night. So one of the things they considered doing was having a committee meeting without the public being able to see it. They were doing on a Zoom platform that they were trying to make work on a Facebook live stream, and they couldn't make the two platforms talk to each other. But they were going to go ahead with the finance committee, and I reminded them of Ohio Revised Code 121.22, which I believe is written on the back of my hand. The public has a right to view meetings, even view and or hear meetings of public entities, even during times of pandemic. So City Council quickly agreed with that. They halted it. They ultimately delayed the entire meeting for almost 48 hours to give their technology people some time to put the thing together. And we'll tee it up again Thursday night and see how it goes. But I think in terms of public service, we have to continue to do the things for the public that they've always wanted us to do. And then we've got to expand on it. I mean, things old school, like covering courts, covering county government, covering city government, covering elections. Those are things we've always done and should do. Things like we're doing today with coronavirus conversation. When I think of how technology has improved public service journalism, I mean, this is a great way. This is something that we didn't do, believe it or not, way back in 1979 when I started out in the business. There was no such thing as a one-line chat.
You were still carving things into stone tablets, weren't you, Carl?
Carl, what was your first again?
My first laptop was a Selectrix, IBM Selectrix 2 electric typewriter
With a mouse inside.
Yeah, with a mouse, and
I love that story.
What does it mean, Larry, from your perspective about being of public service as a journalist during this time? And folks, if you're following us live on Facebook or on Crowdcast, you're going to see Carl Hunnell disappear in a little bit because he's finished answering, and I'm going to be calling 3 of our other reporters up on stage gradually as we move through this question. So it's not that I don't like Carl; it's just that I'm just moving some folks up on stage.
We got the Brady Bunch thing going, the stack.
Larry, talk to us a little bit about what it means to you to be of public service as a journalist, and how have you seen our team been trying to live up to that obligation?
Well, Jay, you talked about it, trying to do journalism with people. We're trying to pay close attention to what the readers are telling us, and the metrics are telling us that two of the most popular things that we're doing right now are the community updates, which those have kind of petered out a little bit because naturally so many things have already been canceled. But that was very popular the first 2 weeks, maybe our most well-read thing. And then kind of taking its place here recently has been the COVID map, where people can see, where this is happening throughout the state, what the local numbers are. And I see there's a question from Reed Richmond here, which is a great example of how involved the local officials are with trying to keep the public informed without scaring people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Reed's question is kind of an interesting one. What's the difference between the public's right to know and an individual's health privacy? And it's a great question. It's a tough one. There's not a hard and fast answer because everyone has the right to privacy. And I think kind of what Reed is alluding to is, people are concerned. I've fielded numerous calls in the newsroom of, hey, I know so-and-so has COVID and you guys aren't telling people. And my pat response to that is really, I kind of throw it back to Reed's folks are, if you are really in a situation where you've been exposed to this, or, the health department is concerned that you may have been exposed to this, they're going to come visit you. Nobody wants this out of the way more than the health department. So we are trying to keep people informed and do it in a rational, calm demeanor.
Brittany, how about you? What is it like from your perspective as a solutions and engagement editor? How does public service manifest itself in our newsroom, and how have you seen us try to do that over the course of the last few weeks? And everybody say goodbye to Larry, because he's gonna disappear like on that Ellen show where they go down the chute. We're gonna send Larry down the chute and bring somebody else up. But Brittany, I'll let you answer that question.
So one thing that I think is interesting is thinking about, and not to get too existential here, but thinking about journalism as public service. Because I think when you hear the word public service right out the gate, I don't know if journalism is necessarily the first thing that you think of, because you might think of like volunteer organizations or, people, but we do serve the public. It's just in information and instead of, like manual labor, for example. But I think in terms of like what we've been doing to try to serve the public. I mean, I remember when, God, it feels like years now, but really it was like 3 weeks ago when we were all in the newsroom, when this was kind of first happening, like when I want to say it was like the week of March 11th and 12th, I think was when, well, I don't want to curse, but things hit the fan.
Something hit the fan.
And it felt like that was when the world really changed. And we were kind of following it as a news organization because, we wanted to be informed, and we're trying to figure out how is this relevant to Richland County? How is all of this relevant to our readers? And then bam, DeWine closed all the schools.
And it just became extraordinarily relevant. Yep.
Exactly.
Overnight.
And, it was one of the few times that we have turned the TV on in our newsroom and we've all been watching a presser at the same time and live tweeting and like doing a story right then and there. And that was us really responding to the moment, which is what we do with breaking news things. But then I think what was really extraordinary, and I give a lot of credit to our team, is we took a step back and decided, okay, this is going to be a thing now. This isn't going away anytime soon. So what can we do to help our readers understand this? And what can we do to cover this in a responsible way and do it in a Richland source way, where we work with the community, where we do this in a local news way, for lack of a better, I'm not good at speaking.
You're fine. You're doing the.
So but I think like creating the COVID-19 section and doing that in literally a day was a huge moment for us in terms of saying, all right, this is where all of the local information is going to be. Moving all of our open source stuff to where people can submit closings and ask questions about COVID-19, and we're going to do our best to answer them. Focusing really everything to say, this is the news moment, and we're going to respond the best way we can, I think was a way for us to say, this is what we can do for the community. And for all of our readers too. I am really grateful that people trust us to ask us these questions and trust that we will get them the answers as best we can. We're all kind of going through this the same as everybody else. So I appreciate all of the faith that people have in us to do this work.
That's great. Thanks, Brittany. And I'm going to press that magic button and kick Brittany off screen, and I'm going to invite my colleague Noah Jones onto the screen with us, and then I also want to introduce you to the folks that are with us right now. So first of all, I want to start with Tiara Thomas. Tiara, wave your hand so everybody knows who you are.
Hi.
Tiara is our Thrive reporter, so she reports principally on how to live well and try to live a better life here in Richland County. She's our newest team member, and we're really glad that she's with us. Katie Ellington is also joining us. Katie, let them know who you are. Katie's a reporter for us, a general assignment reporter, but also focuses a lot on the business community. And so she's with us. And then joining us shortly will be Noah Jones, who has served us a little bit longer than these guys have. And so you might know Noah a little bit more. He does a ton of life and culture reporting and also reports on the justice system and the education system here in the county. So thank you guys for joining me on screen today. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our newsroom partners, our members, and the Facebook Journalism Project, without whom this project wouldn't be able to come together. And I also want to encourage you to drop your questions in the chat. Make sure that if you have questions for our team, the entire team is here with us today, both on Facebook and here on Crowdcast, to take your questions. And we really want to learn from you three key elements. How are we doing? What can we do better? And where should we be looking next? And so I want to turn my reporter's notebook to you guys. And so for all three of you, this concept of public service that your editors and I were talking about earlier, you guys are all really early in your careers. How does it feel to be doing this work right now? And do you feel like the work is somehow different or more critical than the work that you do every day? Help me understand a little bit about how you're feeling about the work that you're doing right now and the moment that you're in as journalists that are a little earlier in your career. I'll start with you, Noah.
I mean, for me, like, this is why I got into the game, right? I wanted to help people better understand what's happening with their lives. In terms of, is it more important news that I'm telling, I don't really think that it's more important. I sort of try and go in with the game plan that every story is worth telling. Otherwise, I wouldn't be worrying about it, especially as a crime reporter. There are different reasons why news is important. And obviously, health and safety with COVID-19 is more obvious maybe than a feature story about someone who's written a song, but there are significant reasons for every story to be told, and I don't think that one story I've written is more important than another story, even if it goes viral, like a Church's Chicken story.
Well, that affected a lot of people too. Tiara, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about how you're feeling in this moment as a journalist and as a reporter, specifically with the beat that you have. How does this feel to you?
It feels like this topic obviously is very important. Like, I cover health and wellness. So I really wanted to dive into why it's important like people be safe, take the stay-at-home order seriously, and I also want to make sure that I'm providing information like of good things happening. And there's no one laughing.
Yeah, so I think somebody just told him to stop touching his face.
Okay.
Which only makes us want to touch our faces more.
No, like, so writing those stories that are important and writing stories that are good. Like, I'm writing a story that isn't really COVID related, but like it has a purpose. As in, like, okay, I don't want to spoil it because
Okay, well, yeah,
but
you heard it here first.
story, and I'm promoting it. I'm self-promoting right now, and that's coming soon. And I think like writing those good stories where like we kind of move away from COVID a little bit, and reminding people that yeah, like this is happening, but we can still live. That's important.
I think that's important, and I think that it's important, when we talk about the facts over fear and trying to help people, part of this is about that life is going on right now, and it's different than what it was a month ago in many really important ways, but helping people stay focused or at least renew their focus on those things is important. Katie, same question to you. Does this feel different or more critical to you than the work that you were doing before? And if so, how? And just what's it like to be a young reporter reporting on a worldwide pandemic through the lens of a local news organization?
Well, it's I'm definitely grateful for the diversity of our team. We have a lot of people who have been doing this for a while, and it's good to be able to go to them for advice and with any questions we have. And then, the young reporters, they bring, our own life experience as millennials. So I think it's great to be part of a team, and that I think communication between our team is more important now than ever, because we're all experiencing this for the first time. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. I don't think the work is necessarily more important than, I guess, normal reporting, because like Noah was saying, our mission every day is to educate people about what's going on in their community and, provide them with information that can help them live their lives in the best possible way.
That's great. Same thing. I'm going to ask a new question for all three of you. And I'll start with you, Tiara. You guys all work out of our Mansfield newsroom, specifically at IdeaWorks. And so unlike Grant and Tracy, and to a lesser extent, Kurt, you guys are together a lot under normal circumstances. How has the separation from each other, your editors and your sources, affected your approach to reporting? What has had to change in this environment where you just don't have that close contact with folks that you might have had before?
I think for me, since I am still new to Richmond stores and as well as the Mansfield community, like I'm from Columbus, so I moved here last summer, but I think the challenge for me really is continuing to like find sources. So I kind of really rely on the newsroom to help me a lot now, because I can't really go out and, ask people questions or anything, because one, I'm not going to find them, and two, they're going to be like, you need to keep your 6 feet distance from me.
Hi, I'm the person you've never met before, and I'd like to shake your hand. That probably won't go over really well right now, right?
So, yeah, I think that's been my biggest challenge. But, we all have like our newsroom meetings almost every single day, and we all share our ideas. And I love getting feedback on what I'm working on, and I love hearing like their stories, and it gives me some ideas of my own that I can work with. So yeah, I'm
So-
very grateful to have them.
So your beat is the Thrive beat, and so you're reporting a lot on wellness and living well, and having improving your life here in the county. If somebody has a story tip, or they feel like they'd like to reach out to you after this, is there a way that you prefer for them to get you their information? So maybe let's help you source right now in real time.
Okay.
How should folks reach out to you, Tiara, if they want to contact you?
They can reach me by email.
Okay.
And email is Tierra, TIERRA, @richlandsource.com.
Great, thanks. Katie, I'll turn this question to you. How's the separation from each other and your sources affected your approach to reporting during the pandemic? What's had to change for you?
Well, finding story ideas definitely looks a lot different from my kitchen table. One of my biggest resources, are business openings and events held by the Richland Area Chamber, and public events, land bank meetings, and for the most part, events are being canceled.
Yep, lots of those things aren't happening right now.
Yeah, so I've actually turned to Facebook a lot, which can be dangerous, but people are doing things in this county still, and they're doing selfless, beautiful things for their neighbors, and they're finding ways to overcome. And we're all storytellers to an extent, so people post that kind of stuff on Facebook, and that's become a great source for leads for me. I can contact those people and follow up and try to get some more information. Email is a lifesaver. I can still interview people over the phone. It's definitely not the same, but I'm very grateful to be living in an age of technology. If this would have happened 20 or 30 years ago, it would have been very difficult.
Noah, how about you?
Yeah, I don't really know that a whole lot has changed for me. I guess that means I'm really good at following the CDC requirements of asking to stick to your routine. But everything that Katie just said, I actually fully endorse and agree with. I've used Facebook a lot more to figure out things. I just found out about someone who's actually using a 3D printer to create these little plastic rectangles with clips on them to hold a security medical mask for doctors and nurses, which is fantastic. I think that one of the things that I brought up at our editorial meeting yesterday was that I think the story after this whole nightmare is over is how beautifully our community and even our state, from every level, really, from the government level all the way down to the people who are asked to stay down and not leave their house, have responded so fantastically. There's a map on the New York Times that I saw the other day that really shows how well people are accepting social distancing and not leaving their home. And they really, it was funny, the Great Lakes states like Ohio and Michigan and all of us are doing so much better than the people on the West Coast. And there are just so many phenomenal stories of heroism that I am just so actually proud to be an Ohioan now and look at how our people are responding. And I think that that's just really, really beautiful. I think that I have forgotten what your main question was, but I just wanted to say that I am very excited about all the different things that people in Richland County have been doing for those around us.
Well, that's a great answer, Noah, and I want to thank you for it. Everybody say goodbye to Katie and Tiara for a second here while I invite some more folks up on stage. And while I'm doing that, I want to make sure that our folks who are with us here know that we really want to hear your questions, and we're looking for 3 key questions as we move through this process. And that is, number one, we want to hear from you about how we're doing. We want to know what that looks like. We want to know from you what we could be doing better right now, how we could improve. And we also want to know from you where you'd like us to turn our attention next. There's Noah, you did a fantastic job of alluding to the fact that these stories are going to continue to come up, and they're going to continue to be part of our storytelling. There's going to be an after COVID-19 or a post crisis when we're in a management place, and if there's stories that you think that we need to be telling, we absolutely tell us what those are. You can email our newsroom at news@richlandsource.com. You can drop those questions in the chat. And so I want to introduce our guests here on screen, one of which I haven't seen forever. Kurt, close those curtains. We're going to work with Grant.
We're coming from an undisclosed location. I got to have shadows on my face.
We're going to help him. We're going to help him. Grant, we're going to help him as we move along. On screen with me right now are three of my colleagues from our newsroom. We've got Kurt Conrad, who's doing his best impression of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now right now. He's just covered in darkness. We can't quite see him. Kurt's our sports reporter, and despite what you might think, he's been busy lately. He's just been having to do other things. And joining us today on screen also is Grant Pepper. Grant, you may not have seen Grant as much because Grant runs our Mount Vernon site, Knox Pages, and Tracy Liturgy, who you knew formerly as Tracy Geibel here at Richland Source, and now she's Tracy Liturgy for quite some time now, and she's also taken over our Ashland Source site, and so she's working a lot in Ashland right now, and I'm really glad that you guys have taken the time to join us today and join our readers today. I've got a quick question for you here. Everybody's adapting like crazy right now. We are, the country is, everyone is. And Kurt, this is specifically for you, and I certainly want Tracy and Grant to jump in here, but you literally have no high school sports to cover right now. There is.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's a big adaptation. And what have you had to do to pivot? What's that been like? What are you up to right now? And how I know you stay in touch with coaches. How are coaches and ADs feeling about next year's season right now?
On terms of what's happening, sports wise locally, I mean, they haven't canceled spring sports yet. I'm afraid it's just a matter of time. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but it seemed like that is the direction it's headed. I've talked to a lot of coaches, especially a lot of athletic directors here recently because of some other things, and everyone's working out of an improvised playbook, basically. I mean, no one knows how to do this, and none of us do. I mean, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go here. For me, I mean, as a sports writer, this is an all hands on deck situation, right? I mean, this is unprecedented what's going on. So any way I can help out, I'm more than glad to do what I can.
What have you found yourself doing these days now that there's not?
Well, I mean, here recently here, there's been a lot of news breaking that affects all three of our sites. The Ohio Cardinal Conference just added an 8th member from New Philadelphia. So in a normal situation, that'd be a really big deal, a much bigger deal than it is now. But I mean, that said, I mean, I'm tracking down coaches and athletic directors here the last few days and getting stuff put together in that regard. And then we've always got to keep an eye on what the Ohio High School Athletic Association is doing. Jerry Snodgrass, the executive director, does a good job of updating the media in Ohio. There's going to come a time in the not too distant future, I'm afraid, where he's going to call a press conference and say we got to shut down spring sports. And then we got to try to get reactions from that. But I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced, and I've been covering sports in Richland County and North Central Ohio for the better part of 20 years now.
Grant and Tracy, how about you guys? I mean, the adaptations that you have had to go through have been pretty significant. I mean, you both work pretty independently right now because you run sites in Ashland and Mount Vernon, but Talk to us a little bit about how your journalism and your approach to journalism has had to change, running operations where you're used to being independent, but maybe not exactly in this way.
Go ahead,
Tracy,
Tracy.
yeah, Tracy, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. So covering Ashland Source, I'm the sole full-time reporter over here. We do have a part-timer, Waylon O'Donnell, who helps me out as well, and I typically meet with him in person once a week, which hasn't been able to happen. Honestly, in regards to communicating with my editing staff and whatnot, which also manages Richland and Knox pages, I think I'm communicating with them more than ever. I mean, typically on a slower news week, I mean, I don't have to check in every day to tell them what I'm doing. But things change so drastically, so quickly anymore that we're meeting every single day, every single weekday to just keep on top of everything. I think this is honestly been really beneficial in that we've collaborated a ton. I've been able to pull from what they're doing. Sometimes they interview an Ashland person and it becomes a regional story. And it provides all this extra perspective and makes stories even more nuanced sometimes. I think it's so important right now to be hearing from multiple different perspectives and being able to learn and grow and implement change so quickly. So yeah, I would say that I'm communicating a ton more with my leadership, with my coworkers, and I'm loving that. And then also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the community. So I think that if this had happened last year, being that we're essential employees, I feel like I would have been maybe just a little less cautious. This year I am expecting, and that definitely changes a lot of things for me. Personally, I've had to be just so cautious and careful. And the community has just been really understanding. I do video calls now with sources, just in addition to phone calls, because it's great to see someone face to face. And people send me photos. I had a photo that was a selfie one day, and I was like, you know what? It's a unique time. Why not? So yeah, I'm just really grateful for everyone on the staff and in the community that has allowed me to continue covering Ashland County at this really unique time.
Grant, how's it been for you? I mean, the adaptation of your reporting style, the need to be able to pivot and think about this a little bit differently. I'd like to hear from you about what you've seen in Mount Vernon, and you joined us just a couple of days ago with Mayor Starr and safety director Zick on one of these, and I'm interested to. It was a great conversation, but how has your reporting style had to adapt, and what are you finding that you're having to do differently now than before?
Yeah, my name's Grant. I'm our Knox Pages reporter. For those seeing me for the first time, I live in Mount Vernon, work in Knox County, and I think that one of the things for me is, like Katie and Tracy both said, I mean, we really do like to talk with people in person. Like, I really enjoy the part of my job where I get to meet new people. That's something in journalism you get to do a lot. And so it's challenging for me when I have to do things over Facebook or the phone. But we're getting it done. I mean, I had three podcast interviews a couple weeks ago and did that via Zoom. And, you know, it's just, we've got this kind of innate ability as humans to just kind of do what we need to do to get it done. And that's just, we're equipped with some really nice technology in 2020. So we're able to do that. But yeah, I mean, for me on a daily basis, I like working in coffee shops. I like, I like being out and seeing people. So that's been tough. But other than that, the community's, like Tracy said, been really great with allowing me to continue to ask them questions at a time when we're all pretty stressed.
Yeah, it's been a really it's been a different time, and we've kind of combined a couple of these questions here. So I'm gonna freestyle a minute and try to learn from Grant in terms of his interviewing style, how he's able to just have a list of questions and then all of a sudden we change based on the answers, and that was great. I learned that from him just the other day. But I want to kind of go back to this idea that we talked about with Larry and Brittany and Carl earlier, which is the concept of public service. Kurt, you've been doing this for a very long time and have been around newsrooms where they have faced national crises in a local environment or local crises, and you've been part of that coverage. Tracy and Grant, you're a little newer in your careers, and so this is probably the biggest story that you've ever covered, I would imagine. Certainly is the biggest one I've ever been around. Talk to us a little bit about what it feels like, or what your thoughts are on being of service to the public as a journalist in this kind of an environment. And Kurt, we'll start with you. What's it mean to be of service to you?
I was around for the terrorist attacks in 9/11. And I guess what really has stuck with me then and now is that, history is watching, this is historic stuff that we're going through. It's a different kind of feeling like it was than it was then. But I still think that even as a sports reporter, people are going to look back on these stories, and it's important that we do our job and do it really well. Not for ourselves so much as for the people who are going to be looking back. It's kind of a overwhelming sense of responsibility. I think that we all have. You don't necessarily realize that as it's going on, but when you look back on it, you think, man, that was a story that, it's going to go on for a long, long time. And we were, even in a very small way, we were a part of it. And that's a responsibility. And I think that the group that we have has really kind of answered the bell, which is really neat to see with a group of young people like we have.
Grant, what about you? What's it feel like to be, for you, what's it mean to be of public service in a situation like this?
Well, Noah said this earlier. I think, this is kind of why we get into journalism, so that we can help people separate fact from fiction. And so, to be able to, first off, be working right now, period. Every day I get up, I feel really lucky to have a job. And there are a lot of people that don't have that privilege. And to be able to be considered not only essential, but a voice in the community that helps answer questions. That's always what I've liked best about journalism, being able to answer questions. But now it's really important at a local level because we have a lot of questions. So that, I think, is the biggest thing, is that we have a lot of questions that need answered, and we are in a position of privilege to be able to get those answers, and people for some reason like to talk to us about those answers. And so that's what I enjoy most about it.
Tracy, how about you?
The thing that comes to mind immediately for me was a question that came in from the community here in Ashland, also in Knox, and I've seen similar in Richland as well. It was a question about why state and local numbers of COVID-19 positive cases had differed. And when I saw that question, I personally knew the answer from talking to the local health department. But there's seriously a ton of confusion out there about this. And this is something that people have such real concerns about. They want to know the impact. And so whenever I saw that question, it was one that I immediately set out to answer. Locally, those numbers should be coming in first. So there's a lag almost between how those numbers are reported on a local level and then get to a state level. Sometimes the wrong zip code is reported. And in Ashland, initially the thought was that there were 3 cases, and indeed there were only 2. Now we are actually up to 3 in Ashland. So, that was one of those things that I immediately wanted to answer. The other thing I would say is I've spent a good bit of time just
reporting on simple things, how the community is responding, what's open, what's closed.
Right.
These things matter right now on a
It's-
really local level.
It's funny, that you mentioned that, and I'm going to ask everybody to wave goodbye to Kurt and Grant as we move on to the next phase of our program. Thanks for joining us, you guys. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, Tracy, because some of the most popular content on the sources sites right now are the informational public service content. The COVID-19 tracker. I can't tell you how long the life of the article that we put together of the restaurants that are open for takeout, and the frequent updates of that. People, it's just a public service of, I really want a sandwich, and where can I go to get it? And it's and in that case, it's definitely not capital J journalism, but it's capital U useful, and it's capital H helpful, and so I think it's so one of the things that I'm sort of seeing you identify there that's important is just this idea of not everything wins a Pulitzer Prize, and that's okay, because some of the things that we do it's really important to just do those things and to try to do them well. So I'm going to invite a few new people up onto the screen as we move to audience questions, and I'm going to bring our editors back up on the screen for this next section if they're able to join us. And I want to thank you, Tracy. Thank you for joining us today and being part of this.
Yeah.
And we're going to turn our eyes to our audience's questions here. And we're glad, because we've had some folks who've asked, and I'm going to be able to bring Brittany and Larry and Carl back on with us here. And I want to make a quick couple call outs. Joining us on the call today is longtime veteran journalist Bridget Coles. Bridget's in the chat today. We're so glad to have you here, Bridget. And also a friend of mine from the Nashville, Tennessee area, Kelly Gilfillan, the publisher of Homepage Media Group, is joining us on the call today. And Kelly, we're really glad to have you. Make sure you say howdy y'all to Kelly, and make sure you get your Southern accent right, because she's a strong sense for getting that right. So we want to make sure that she's available. So guys, welcome back. And we're going to turn our eyes to some of the questions here that we've got, and from Marty, we have a question: is how are students of all ages learning, coping, and thriving with online education? Do we have a sense of what we're seeing from the education systems right now? And I know that I had a lovely conversation with Mike Ziegelhofer and Stan Jefferson recently, but talk to us a little bit about your reporting. What are you guys seeing from the point of view of the education system?
Well,
Marty.
I've got an in-home experience with it. I'm married to a teacher, and I have two students as children, and so it's a personal experience for us. But I think what we're learning is that it's different for each school system. Some schools are probably one of the biggest elements is actually feeding the kids is a big part of it. Some are handling how assignments are transmitted and trying to overcome the lack of internet access and technology for some of the students. So I think it's very specific to each school district. Lexington, as a perfect example, has already scheduled their own prom and graduation ceremonies for later in the summer because they want their seniors to be recognized, which I think is a great idea. I hope they're able to carry that off. But I think what we're seeing is that each school district is handling this in a unique way because of the dynamics that are in place in their regions.
Yeah, and I have a similar first-person experience because of my wife is also a teacher, and I'll go back to what Mike Ziegelhofer said in our episode last week, which I thought which was great coming from a superintendent. This authentic moment where someone asked him, how can I be a teacher at home? And he said, just do your best, because the realization is your kids are not going to learn as well at home in this environment as they would if they were in school. And someone even asked about Common Core math. and they asked Mike, is it okay for me to teach my kids math the old way because I don't know how to do Common Core math? And Mike said quickly and completely genuinely, I don't know how to do Common Core math either. So you do you and do it in whatever way you need to do it in order to teach your kids reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I think that's a really honest answer from both our parts. I think that there's great evidence that the school systems are busting their humps to try to adapt to this and to take care of all of the different needs that their stakeholders and families have. And that can be reliable nutrition on down to reliable education. And it is a huge variance, and you can tell that they're working really hard.
The thing that's funny to me on that too, Jay, is that the genuine care that they have in their students. And one of the things, one of the stories that we're working on is how Richland County Children's Services has fewer abuse cases being reported. And one of the reasons for that is because the teachers don't see the kids every day, and they feel an ownership in that. And that permeates, that's not unique to Richland County, but it just permeates with how much they do care. And if they come out of this with anything else, maybe that will resonate with their respective communities, that your school district does care about your kids.
Yeah. And I think we've got a great question here from Dave P. On the chat with us today. Dave, thanks for joining us. I'm going to read the question. I think RS has done a great job during this crisis and before. I read an article recently in a national news source that in New York City, there has been a large increase in business property crimes, both in theft and breaking and entry of closed businesses. Has there been any information of a similar trend happening in the Mansfield area? And he secondly asked, I always read the police calls in the other local publication, and I can only imagine that he means our colleagues at the Mansfield News Journal. Are there any plans or interest by RS in doing this type of coverage on a countywide basis? So let's take the first question. Let's take the first part first. Do we know anything? Have there been increases in B&Es or business-related crime as more and more businesses are closed right now? Do we know?
Well, I did a story last week talking to some firefighters and Mansfield police officers on how they're dealing during the times of COVID-19. And I asked one of these are patrol officers, and I just asked him, I said, are you guys busier now than you've been in the past? And he said, empirically, he didn't have specific data. He goes, I don't think business has picked up. He said, we're doing more things over the phone, as many things as we can do over the phone now. If it's, somebody calls in with a problem, if they can do a report over the phone, they'll do it that way. Mm-hmm. So at least from a patrolman level, and Lori Cope was on the, unfortunately, it looks like she had to leave, but the safety service director, the safety service director was just on, and I chat with her from time to time. I think if there had been a marked increase, we would have heard about it. There are stories going around that domestic violence may be on the rise because we're all forced to spend more time with one another. Now, that's anecdotal, at least at this point. I don't have any hard numbers, but that's something we'll look at.
We also did a story last week on a church being vandalized as well. So again, an anecdotal story. I don't know that that's widespread, but there has been instances of it.
Might be worth looking into from our point to kind of do a before and after to see if we see something. And Dave, on your other question, this has been something that we have decided since very early on, since the day that we were founded, that police calls in that very traditional sense were not something that we were going to focus on or expend energy on. As you know, we do a ton of reporting on justice and crimes when those things are affecting a lot of folks, but we do avoid that, and I really don't expect that police calls, as you see them in other publications, would start to appear in the source unless we really took time to really think about our justice and our criminal justice coverage differently. And I know that right now our newsroom is going through a strategic planning process, and they are looking at coverage verticals and how we're going to think about that coverage as we move forward. But I really appreciate you asking. And if you want to talk about it further, you can reach out to me at jay@richlandsource.com, RICHLANDSOURCE.com, and be happy to either talk to you about it further or to hook you up with Larry and Carl and Brittany to do the same. So moving on down from Douglas Rutherford on Knox Pages, and I want to open this up to you guys because I think Doug is talking about, he writes on Knox Pages, right now journalism has a bad name with companies like CNN and MSNBC doing all they can to cause harm with lies. And I think what Doug is referring to really, and I want to rephrase this question because I want to make sure that we're dealing with the panic and the national cable news rage machine. I want to make sure that we're dealing with them all equally. Doug, to answer your question, I'm going to throw it to our team. CNN, or certainly MSNBC and Fox News, are built the exact same way. They're built to make you angry. They're built to reinforce the stuff that you already believe and create a situation where you can get angry about stuff that you're angry about. And that's working for them. They're both making a lot of money. And I'd like for you guys, our editors, to speak about what's a local newsroom? Why is that different? And how can we reassure Doug that what he's seeing from us on Knox Pages, but our readers that are with us here today on Richland Source and Ashland Source, how can we reassure him that there's a big difference between national cable information networks like Fox and MSNBC and on down the line? How can we reassure him that we're different than that and we're not talking about the same thing? Larry, Larry, you have opinions about this, and I'm going to let you start.
Well, I think it's somewhat self-evident, and we've talked about this a lot in the newsroom. I don't think people are that interested in party affiliation at this level. Like you said, CNN and MSNBC clearly have a bent, and Fox clearly has a bent, and we clearly don't. We're going to cover local folks and local politicians and local governments, and the party affiliation just doesn't come into play. I don't think I've ever sat in a city council meeting when somebody decided that since the mayor is pro-abortion, that means a thing. I'm sorry, pro-life, pro-choice, whatever. That's irrelevant when we're talking about how much somebody's water bill is. So I don't think that this is going to harm trust in local journalism. I understand the concern about the national spin. I think it's a legitimate complaint. Other people feel differently, and that's fine. Everybody's allowed to have an opinion, but I don't think that our credibility is going to be hurt at the local level. And frankly, I don't think it's going to be any different at the national level either, because like you said, Jay, everybody's just running to the point of view that they already have, and it's being reinforced at those specific networks, and that's kind of the end of it.
Carl, anything to add on this?
Well, it seems like forever ago, but one of the things that I think makes us different, if you go back to last fall when we were doing those talk the vote sessions, and we were meeting with people and asking them to tell us what issues were important to them. I mean, I think as long as we are doing stories from a reader point of view and what's important to the reader, it doesn't matter who the elected official is. It doesn't matter what party they are. We're going to do things the right way. And quite honestly, I've never been happier in my very long journalism career not to be covering anything in Washington, D.C. today.
So good. Brittany, anything from you on this one?
Yeah, I think when people criticize the media and they glom it all together and say the media, it makes me cringe because we are part of the media, but I don't think it's us that they're talking about when they say that. I think you are talking about the big networks, no matter, I would include all of them, no matter which party you're from. Those echo chambers, like you said, like no matter which network you're on, you're just hearing the things that already affirm what you believe. I look at that and it's so disappointing to me that that is where people get their news, because they're so far from what news is, and in my belief, which is, you know, serving people, informing people. It's just like, I remember, you know, being in journalism school and feeling like if I was a local journalist, then it was just a stepping stone to a bigger publication like a news network or, you know, a national paper. And I 100% have changed my view on that now, because I think personally that local news is the most important news that you're going to be reading, because I'm a little biased, but I think we're just far more genuine in terms of what our mission is and what we're trying to do. And there's not an entertainment slant and there's not an agenda. We're just trying to tell stories and inform people and make their lives a little better. So, I don't really think we have kind of anything to do with with those big guys. I think I would advise, if you're looking for media that isn't lies and isn't true, turn that crap off and read Richland Source instead.
Well,
exactly, Brittany, you're right.
I don't know that we could have ended on a better note. We have come to the end of our lunch hour, and the rest of these guys all need to get back to work. So myself included, but I really wanted, in all seriousness, I want to thank our team for making themselves available to be part of this kind of special edition of Coronavirus Conversations. I want to thank everybody that appeared in the chat with us, from respected local leaders to our colleagues in media, to folks as far away from Nashville, Tennessee, who joined us to be part of this conversation. None of this happens. Coronavirus Conversations, Richland Source, Ashland Source, Knox Pages, the work that these reporters do, none of this happens without the support of our members, our newsroom partners, philanthropies like the Facebook Journalism Project, who helped us put this together and helped us be able to spin it up as quickly as we did. The reality of the local news business is not a pretty picture, and it's getting worse, and coronavirus isn't helping. So small businesses we're just like any other small business. And I'm going to take this moment to just remind you and to remind ourselves and everyone, all of our team that's on the call with us and everybody that's still here with us. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for reading us and being part of your community, for doing journalism with us. And if you think that if you're in a position, and I know that all of us are in a very uncertain time, but if you're in a position to do so and you'd like to support independent local journalism, I'd encourage you to become a member if you're not one already. 100% of all of our memberships go directly to support the reporters and editors that have joined me on screen today. And I want to thank you again for being here, guys. And I want to thank our readers for being part of this conversation. And we will see you tomorrow on Coronavirus Conversations at noon, where we are going to talk about something that I've become much more interested and proficient in recently, which is cooking. I'm interested in gardening, and I'm becoming more proficient at cooking because I'm doing a lot more of it. So we're going to have Susan Vandermaas, Chef Susan Vandermaas from Doc's Deli is going to join us, along with Karina Gettle from the Entrepreneur's Kitchen at IdeaWorks. Along with, we hope, Walter Bond from the NECIC Microfarms is going to join us, although he's working his schedule because he's building a greenhouse tomorrow, so he's going to see if he can join us remote from the greenhouse site. But we're going to talk about cooking and gardening and kind of living healthy in the time of the coronavirus. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on Coronavirus Conversations. Thank you for being readers of Richland Source, and thank you for supporting local news. And we out.
Yeah.